Chapter 41. Charlie is sad, but he can't say it. Winning a match wasn't just about shouting slogans. From the first whistle, Hogwarts was at a complete disadvantage. Charlie hovered above the pitch, panic tightening his chest. Only Cedric seemed to be thinking about teamwork. The other two chasers flew like lone wolves. Whenever one of them caught the quaffle, they charged straight for Bobadon's hoops alone. Their flying was superb, and they sometimes broke through the defense, but their attack routes were predictable, and Beauxbaton's keeper didn't look the least bit worried. By contrast, the Beauxbaton's players passed and moved with flawless coordination, as if they could read each other's minds. No matter what Hogwarts tried, they couldn't find an answer. Against that kind of team, even if Keeper Wood had 3 heads and 6 arms, he would struggle to stop every shot. Ding! The bell rang, and Beauxbaton scored again, 40-0. The stands erupted. Beauxbaton's fans cheered wildly. The Hogwarts supporters fell quiet. After the visitors scored a 4th time, Charlie could no longer hold back. He angled his broom down and flew straight toward his chasers. Only 10 minutes in, and the other side had already scored 4 goals. How could they be playing like this? At this rate, the gap would be impossible to close before he even had a chance at the snitch. To hell with the snitch, he needed to wake these idiots up. Marcus, Debbie, you two beaters, are you under a confundus? Stop tailing them, interfere with their attacks, he shouted, voice carrying. And you 3 chasers, do you even know how to play? My grandmother could do better. Landon, Paul, how many chances are you going to waste? Do you deserve Cedric's passes? If you two don't start cooperating properly, I'll take you off the school team. Professor won't be able to save you. I said it! Professor McGonagall in the stands stiffened at Charlie's tirade. She pursed her lips, but when she saw the scoreboard, she said nothing, only let out a soft sigh. Sebastian, however, was pleased. Now that was the kind of captain he wanted to see. Charlie was a good player who had worked hard. As captain of the school team, he had always been polite and measured with everyone. He had worried that being too strict would fracture the team's unity. He had forgotten that courtesy can also leave distance. Charlie had been relaxed when dealing with Wood. His Muggle Studies class had brought him closer to Marcus, and on the pitch, Marcus listened to Charlie. But with Paul and the others, Charlie simply wasn't familiar enough. His politeness had not produced results. The scolding worked. With Cedric mediating, the 3 chasers began to play together better, and Marcus and Debbie's cooperation as beaters improved as well. But the early deficit was too large to erase. The score kept climbing, 280-60. The final whistle blew. Hogwarts had been routed. Watching the players trudge off the pitch, Sebastian's smile was faint but satisfied. The result didn't matter so much to him. As a professor, he had seen growth. Under pressure, Landon and Paul had finally learned to cooperate. Cedric's coordination had pulled the chasers into more effective teamwork. The beaters were more harmonious. Those improvements mattered more than victory or defeat. Not bad. Pressure had produced results. That grinning professor, pay attention, Snape's voice cut in. I don't know how you can smile at a defeat. If you look over at the headmaster, you'd think Fudge had changed species, Sebastian muttered. Sebastian glanced that way. Fudge's face was the color of coal, the kind of smile plastered on that was more grimace than cheer, as he forced small talk with Madame Maxime and Dumbledore. Sebastian nudged Snape's arm. Severus, I'm responsible for entertaining our guests tonight. Could you keep an eye on the players for me? Make sure nothing else goes wrong? That night, Charlie couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned inside his dormitory bed. The defeat ate at him. It wasn't just being beaten, it was the way his teammates had played. When they practiced with the 4 houses, he could handle them. Today was like a bucket of cold water. He'd gone straight to his dorm after the match, drawn his bed curtains closed, and shut himself away. He neither ate nor drank. His head was thick with shame. He could barely remember leaving the pitch after the customary handshakes with Beauxbatons. All he could see was the disappointed faces in the stands and hear girls sobbing. Even now, curled up in the dark, he could hear students hurrying past, whispering complaints. He wanted to cover his ears, but inside his small, curtained world, there was only the sound of his breathing and his heartbeat. His thoughts were muddled. He kept switching the light over his bed on and off. He thought of Penelope, the cheer captain. He'd seen her when he came down from the sky, hands over her face and crying, Percy beside her trying to comfort her. Penelope had done everything a captain should. No matter how bad the score, she kept leading the cheers. The pressure on her had to have been immense. Charlie wanted to shout, to vent the bitterness that tightened his throat. As Seeker, he'd done everything he could. When he first spotted the golden snitch, he stayed within a body length of the opposing Seeker. He had been sure he could turn the match by catching the snitch first. He hadn't expected Beauxbatons to abandon their defense and pour people on him, disrupting his flight and stopping him from closing in. He reached out in the dark and made a grabbing motion at the ceiling light, as if catching the snitch. He felt wronged and wanted to insist he'd done his best, but a quiet voice in his head asked, "Is that really true?" Charlie, as captain, couldn't lie to himself. He had noticed the team's lack of coordination for a long time, but out of politeness had not been strict. From that angle, he had failed. The more he thought about the chaotic play on the pitch, the angrier he got. Why hadn't Professor Swann let the Gryffindor team represent Hogwarts? If he'd led today, things would have been different, he thought. But the thought passed. What did Professor Swann have to do with his failure? Swann had given them robes and new brooms, had given special tutoring, and patiently drilled flying skills and cooperative tactics. He had stood on the pitch and emphasized teamwork until it seemed a catchphrase. The result of the match was Charlie's responsibility. The captain was the one who set standards and enforced them. Suddenly something clicked. He finally saw the difference between being a house captain and being captain of the school team. There were no longer Gryffindors, Hufflepuffs, Ravenclaws, or Slytherins on the school team. There were only Hogwarts players. He needed to bind everyone together into one unit and lead them against the other schools. He remembered how spirited he'd felt when he first became captain, and how foolish that spirit now seemed. He sighed, a long, tired sound. "Sigh. I'm so hard on myself," he whispered into the dark. Chapter 42. The Warm-Hearted Man is Cedric. A gentle morning breeze drifted through the castle as the owls hooted and began their day's deliveries. Charlie sat hunched at the Gryffindor table, dark circles under his eyes, picking at his breakfast. When the owls came in, he glanced up briefly, then went back to his plate. His mind was full of Quidditch. He was determined to make the team train harder and redeem themselves. Nothing else seemed to matter. Wood slid into the seat beside him, holding a copy of the Daily Prophet. He looked worried. "Charlie, look at this," he said. Charlie turned the paper over and felt a flare of anger. The front page headline screamed, "Sebastian Swann, a misleading professor, Rita Skeeter." He pushed his meal aside and read. The article mocked Sebastian Swann, the former star seeker who had arrived at Hogwarts as a professor, accusing him of being useless at teaching and of misleading students. It pointed to yesterday's disastrous match as proof and suggested Dumbledore had made a terrible mistake appointing him. Skeeter speculated that Swann might be hiding his true abilities or else simply incompetent, and even hinted at a shady deal between Swann and the headmaster. There were claims that Swann had brought strange alchemical items to the school before term began. The tone was scathing and relentless. With every paragraph Charlie read, his hands tightened on the paper until his knuckles went white. The article burned at him like acid. How dare Rita Skeeter smear Professor Swann like that? How dare she insult the man who had taught them so much? He barely noticed the other students' voices as they echoed what the paper had said, voices that made his anger flare even brighter. Isn't Professor Swann in charge of the project? He should be responsible for yesterday's failure. One of the younger students said. Is he actually competent? Another asked. He was a great seeker, but that doesn't mean he can teach. Maybe he only understands chasing the snitch. I think he's terrible for pure-blood pride, taking children to the Muggle world like it's a vacation. What good can come of that? Hearing this, Charlie could no longer hold himself together. He pushed up from the table to retort, but someone was quicker. Marcus, a Slytherin whose face was taut with fury, slammed his fist against the table. The bang silenced the chatter. Marcus leapt up, crossed the table, grabbed the collar of the Slytherin student nearest him, and hauled him upright. Is that thing on your shoulder just for decoration? He snarled. Have you got a troll where your brain should be? Don't you have your own thoughts? Whatever the newspaper says isn't true. If I wrote an article calling you good for nothing, would that make it so? The boy Marcus held, McNair, shot back, bitter and unrepentant. I think the paper's right. Swann's a disgrace to our bloodline, taking students to the Muggle world. What degradation! Marcus's jaw tightened, and he raised his fist. Before it could fall, a spell flew out from the entrance and separated them with a crack. Marcus, assaulting a fellow student, Slytherin, 3 points deducted. Professor Snape stood framed in the doorway, black cloak streaming as he stalked forward. He looked at Marcus without expression, then turned his cold, hollow gaze to McNair. McNair, insulting a professor. Slytherin, 20 more points deducted. He added with a dry, clipped tone, Mr. McNair, you have earned 2 months' detention. I trust you will not lack for flobberworm mucus for some time. Having punished the pair, Snape spun toward the rest of the hall. What are you all still staring at? Don't you have classes this morning? If anyone is late for my lessons, they will be under Mr. McNair's supervision with a tank of flobberworms. Only when Snape's dark figure had slipped back through the doorway did the students relax. The whispering resumed, the same arguments and accusations cycling anew. Charlie couldn't bear it. He greeted a few of his teammates from other houses, then took Wood's arm and left the great hall. A little group soon gathered outside where, unlike usual, none of them looked lively. Everybody had their heads bowed and wore embarrassed looks. Cedric's head was almost bowed to his chest. Charlie looked at them and spoke quietly. Everyone read the paper this morning? Marcus broke in before he could finish. That report is nonsense, lies. Not a word of it can be trusted. I know it's rubbish, Charlie said, but I've been thinking, how do you suppose Professor Swann feels about this? We were furious at that match. He taught us so much, and yesterday was a mess. Now everyone's turning on him. Cedric lifted his head. He must be even more upset than we are, he said. If I were Professor Swann, I'd be heartbroken. Maybe we should go apologize, another voice offered. It might help him a little. Charlie nodded. Cedric's right. Let's go find Professor Swann now. With a flash of green flame, Sebastian stepped out of the office fireplace. He waved his wand and cast Scourgify on himself, then stretched and yawned. He'd worked late the night before and had slept very little. He felt sluggish this morning. He had no morning classes, but as a new professor, he still had to get to school early to prepare his lessons. Making Muggle studies lively and interesting took a lot of energy. He kept telling himself, it will be easier next year. Another yawn escaped him. Should I lie on the sofa and take a nap? A knock sounded at the door. Who could be so early? According to his magical sense, it was a small group of students. He opened the door and found 7 of the Quidditch players standing there, eyes darting away, unwilling to meet him directly. Professor, Charlie began, then faltered. He noticed that Professor Swann's eyes looked a little red and slightly moist, as if he had been crying. Charlie's whole body went still. Could the professor have cried after reading today's Daily Prophet? No wonder his eyes were wet. The discovery was impossible and awkward, and Charlie didn't know what to do. Should he comfort the professor about the article or apologize again for yesterday's match? He hesitated. Sebastian saw Charlie's uncertain expression, smiled, and stepped aside to let the students in. He tapped his wand and transfigured the office sofa into a large U-shaped couch so everyone could sit. Is there anything? He asked, breaking the silence. Before Charlie could speak, Cedric's voice piped up in confusion. Professor, why don't you look angry at all? Charlie almost choked. Cedric was still too young to read the room. This wasn't not angry. This was crying angry. Angry? Sebastian asked, genuinely puzzled. Charlie's heart dropped. The moment felt embarrassingly melodramatic. How should he respond? Should he blurt out, Professor, don't cry, we're behind you? That sounded overly forward, and no grown man admitted he'd been crying. Charlie shifted awkwardly, toes scrabbling against the floor inside his shoes. His teammates looked at him with hopeful, urging glances. You're the captain, you go first, we'll back you up. Charlie swallowed and decided to dive in. He produced the copy of the Daily Prophet he'd hidden and held it up. Professor, please don't cry. We saw the paper too, and we're all very angry. He forced himself onward. But don't worry, none of us believe a word of it. We support you." Cedric widened his eyes in admiration. The professor had cried, and Captain Charlie had noticed it right away. Cedric's own eyes went misty, imagining how embarrassed Professor Swann must feel. "We mustn't embarrass him," he thought, and his cheeks reddened. For a moment, Sebastian's face was a blank question mark. Cry? Me? He blinked. What a strange turn of events. Why were his players fussing over him as if he'd been crying? Some of them looked genuinely upset. Cedric's eyes were red, and the only girl among them, Debbie, had tears in hers. The atmosphere thickened with awkward sympathy. Sebastian hurried to correct them. "I didn't cry. You've all misunderstood. No need to say anything. Professor, we understand." Marcus stood up, eyes blazing. "That disgusting Daily Prophet, printing lies like that." "And what's worse is that some students actually believed it," another chimed in. "I swear, if I hear anyone speaking ill of you again, even if it costs my house points, Marcus spat, "I'll give them a proper beating." "Me too. Count me in." Several of the students piled on, promising to defend the professor to the hilt. Even usually well-behaved Cedric thumped his chest and vowed to persuade anyone who'd listen to the paper. Sebastian pinched the bridge of his nose. He felt like a caricature, the sudden leader of a vengeful faction. He pictured Hogwarts split into two camps, Charlie and Marcus leading their followers, charging through the corridors, while old Deng stepped in to restore order. This was ridiculous. He wasn't the Dark Lord. He shook the thought away. Maybe it was just that he'd stepped out of the fireplace on the wrong foot this morning. He moved to change the subject. "All right, sit down. I didn't cry, honestly, and no fighting, understood? Especially you, Marcus. If I hear you bullied a classmate, you'll be the first one off the team." The students calmed, sheepish and a little embarrassed. Sebastian knew there had been a misunderstanding, but he couldn't figure out how it had started. To keep things from getting worse, he steered the conversation towards something useful. He pulled an enchanted television and a projector from a bag enchanted with an undetectable extension charm and said gently, "You don't have first period today, do you? Let's review yesterday's match." After dismissing them, Sebastian exhaled and sank onto the couch. He hadn't been upset by the Daily Prophet at all, but the student's concern had warmed him. Still, the notion that rumors had him crying was baffling. He hoped it would end there. It didn't. By lunchtime, the gossip had spread. As he walked to the great hall, hushed voices followed him down the corridor. "Did you hear? Professor Swann cried when he read today's paper." "I heard he hid in his office and cried all morning." "You're behind. After the Beauxbatons guests left yesterday, he felt more and more ashamed. He didn't even go home. He cried all night." "How could anyone speak ill of him? He's done so much for the school." "Professor Swann's so sensitive, not very grown-up." Sebastian scowled. How did such a rumor travel so fast? It felt like the whole school knew. Kids came up to him with sympathetic looks or clapped his shoulder and told him to keep his chin up. He smiled and nodded by reflex, but he was mortified. He couldn't eat. He had the house elves bring his lunch to his office instead. And that reporter, Rita Skeeter, he hadn't planned to make a fuss, but he was very angry now. Consequences would be severe. She wouldn't get away with this. He pictured sending an owl to deliver a very pointed message. Chapter 44. Who is the Uncrowned King? If Sebastian Swann had to pick 3 people he disliked most in the magical world, Rita Skeeter would certainly be on that list. The unscrupulous reporter was a master at twisting facts and spinning exaggerated stories to grab readers' attention. Her craftiness lay in always including a kernel of truth. She was very good at magnifying and fabricating from that seed to satisfy the public's curiosity. Over the years, she'd made many enemies, but she'd also prepared plenty of safe houses. She moved frequently, making it hard for those who wanted to get at her to find her. Sebastian had no wish to pick a fight with her, until now. His students were furious. He wasn't the sort to let slights go unanswered, especially when their anger was his to calm. Rumors about him were spreading through Hogwarts, ruining his reputation. That was intolerable. "Rita, you asked for this. I can't punish my students, but I can punish you. Today, I'll show you how red the flowers can be." That afternoon, Sebastian stood before a house on the outskirts of Birmingham. Reliable sources said Rita had left London the day before and was staying here. He He paused at the gate and widened his magical perception. Inside, a wizard, likely a witch, was bent over a table, quill scratching parchment. "Got you, Rita." He first cast a muggle-repelling charm, then, an evil smile playing at his mouth, rang the bell. Ding-dong, ding-dong. The door opened to reveal a woman with elaborate makeup. She pushed her spectacles up her nose and peered at the visitor with annoyance. "Who is it? I'm writing. Don't bother me." There was something familiar about him. "I am Sebastian Swann." He introduced himself with a polite bow. "I apologize for the intrusion. Please do forgive me." Instantly, the displeasure in Rita Skeeter's expression melted into wary curiosity. Why would this man be at her doorstep? She just criticized him this morning. How did he find her? "Don't worry," Sebastian said softly. "I've come to bring you some important news I think you'll like." Rita relaxed slightly. From what she knew, Sebastian had worked hard on his reputation and guarded his image. He was a Hogwarts professor now. He wouldn't act recklessly. Important news sounded like a bribe by other means. "He knows what I like," she thought with a tingle of satisfaction. "And he's wealthy. If his news is valuable, maybe I can get something out of him." An exclusive like this could sell copies for a week. She stepped aside and invited him in. "Please have a seat." Rita sat opposite him and set a sheet of parchment and a quick quotes quill on the table, eyes bright with anticipation. "Mr. Swann, I trust you don't mind if I use my quick quotes quill to record our conversation? It makes things easier," she added. "If you're ready, we can begin." Sebastian looked around. The room was tidy and sparsely decorated, a decent temporary lodging. He glanced at the parchment and noticed a headline half-written, "The Hypocritical Sebastian Swann." He chuckled inwardly. A follow-up to the Daily Prophet's article, no doubt. "Don't mind that," Rita said with a coquettish smile. "It's just an unfinished piece. The final content depends on our conversation. I hope we have a very pleasant exchange." She meant it as a subtle threat. She felt she had the upper hand. Rita Skeeter had the gall to spout nonsense right in front of the subject of her articles. Sebastian was mildly speechless at her audacity. "Miss Skeeter," he said, playful but measuring, "before we begin, I want to ask you something. You've made many enemies in journalism, but you've never offended someone you couldn't afford to. Tell me, am I an easy target?" He put a copy of that morning's Daily Prophet on the table and slid it toward her. "Who gave you the courage to write that piece?" Rita's smile faltered. Sebastian continued cuttingly, "You've always been shrewd, and today I find your work disappointing." Her expression twisted with anger. "Sebastian Swann, what are you doing here? Get out of my house, now! You're not welcome." At her command, the quick quotes quill snapped up and began to write in a furious, looping hand. "Sebastian Swann is not only sanctimonious and hypocritical, but also small-minded, vengeful, and dangerously unstable." Upon reading the author's report, Sebastian Swann forced his way into the author's home, threatening the author's personal safety. The author calls on everyone to see through this hypocrite's true colors and not be deceived by his appearance. The author expresses deep concern for the future of the magical world. With such a dangerous individual as a professor at Hogwarts, who knows what harms our next generation might suffer? The author calls for resistance against Swann alchemy, beginning with you and me. As the quill scrawled the words, Rita felt a rush of pleasure curl through her. How dare he barge into my home? He doesn't understand how powerful words can be. Once my piece runs, what will he do? Reply with his Swann media. Ha! In the realm of words, I am the uncrowned king. The day you're disgraced and ruined will be the day you beg before me. Chapter 45. You are all playing me. Rita Skeeter's face contorted. Sebastian's lips curved in a faint, amused smile. He exhaled, and a sudden pressure of magic rolled off him, a presence so vast and cold that Rita felt the air tighten in her chest. For a moment she was back in Diagon Alley, a terrified onlooker when you-know-who walked by at the height of his power. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her wand and pointed it at him. Before she could form a threat, a fine white frost crept over the tip of her wand and thickened into solid ice. The frost raced down toward her fingers so fast she cried out, dropped the wand, and watched in horror as the entire thing encrusted with ice. With a sharp snap, it broke apart on the floor. Rita screamed and collapsed backward, shaking. You, how dare you? The Aurors will come for you." Sebastian only smiled. Aurors. Madam, would you like me to call them? I insist, she stammered, desperate. All right, I'll help you make a formal report. He flicked his wand out the window and cast a quick charm, then set a small pouch of galleons on the table. I'm sorry about your wand. You can take this to Ollivander's and buy a new one. Less than a minute later, the door burst open. Aurors on official business. No one move. Rita leapt up, bolstered by the arrival. She flew to the door. Auror, I'd like to report an attack. Sebastian remained calm on the sofa. He waved at the two Aurors who entered. Hello, Dolores. Seeing the Aurors, Rita found her courage again and hid behind one of them, pointing at Sebastian and shouting, Auror, he attacked me! Arrest him! Dolores approached Sebastian with a stern expression. Mr. Swann, please hand over your wand. Cast a prior incantado. We need to check whether you used any offensive magic. Sebastian rose and willingly handed his wand over. Dolores invoked the spell, and the wand's recent signatures scrolled by. Warning charm, muggle repelling charm, scouring charm, a dozen entries, none of them hostile. She returned the wand with an apologetic smile. It appears to be a misunderstanding, Mr. Swann. You're innocent. Innocent, Rita shrieked. He destroyed my wand. He did it on purpose. Dolores's voice grew sharp. Silence. Are you questioning the competence of Aurors? According to the evidence at the scene, your wand broke on its own, Dolores replied. If you continue to make false accusations and cause trouble, we have the authority to take you in for obstruction. Rita's face drained of color. The certainty that had been with her only moments before unraveled. How could two Aurors have been so quick, so evidently in Sebastian's corner? A cold realization slid through her. This had been set up. How many in the ministry were already on his side? How deep did his influence run? She fell suddenly quiet. Dolores shot Sebastian a brief nod and left, closing the door behind her. The click of the latch echoed like a verdict. Rita's terror left her shaking. She turned back to Sebastian, voice thin. Can we sit and talk properly? Of course, Sebastian said quietly. Rita hurriedly bowed. Professor Swann, please sit. Once he had taken his seat, Rita perched opposite him, folding her hands tightly. Professor Swann, what do you want from me? Sebastian's voice was soft. Don't be afraid. I did come today with important news. On the table between them, a tiny beetle of gleaming ice crawled into being. Rita's heart lurched as if punched. The creature was an exact replica of the beetle she used in her animagus form. He knows I'm an animagus. He knows my form. Rita's mind spun. Madam Rita Skeeter, Sebastian said, his tone polite and cold. The information you have is valuable, yes? She forced out a wobbly smile. Yes, very valuable. How many enemies has Swann Alchemy made as it has risen? He continued. How many have coveted what I have built? How have I treated those who opposed me? You have offended many, he said. They detest you and your little tricks, but they cannot find you sometimes. Many consider you beneath their attention, until now. Unlike them, his voice shifted, sharper. I am a Slytherin. When someone spits in my face, I like to reply in a way that makes them remember. He raised his wand. A pale yellow orb of light shot out and struck Rita in the chest, sinking cold and lightless into her. She winced. This is a seed, Sebastian said quietly, eyes hard. If you cross me again, if you displease me, then the fate of you, this little insect, will be very unpleasant. He snapped his fingers. The stack of parchments on the table burst into furious orange flame with a howl of heat and light. Fiend fire, he intoned. Rita screamed and scrambled back to the wall, crawling on all fours. The fire licked and snarled, but under Sebastian's faultless control, it behaved like a trained hound. The flames consumed the papers and nothing else. The tabletop, the glass, even the air around them was untouched. In the blink of an eye, every scrap of paper was ash. Sebastian rose and bowed to her with immaculate courtesy. Madam Rita Skeeter, I do hope we will not meet for a very long time, he said, and I sincerely wish you sweet dreams tonight. Goodbye. Chapter 46. Sebastian's Bad Taste. Rita Skeeter sat motionless on the floor, eyes vacant and staring in the direction Sebastian had gone as if she were a statue. It wasn't until she heard the sound of his apparition that her pupils sharpened and she slowly came back to herself. Her lips trembled, whether from fear, anger, or a sense of injured pride she couldn't tell. She said nothing, only pressed both hands against her chest. The words Sebastian had spat at her before leaving replayed in her mind. I've planted a special seed in your heart. A seed? Had that man planted fiendfire in her heart? If she crossed him again, would she burn from the inside out? The thought made her blood run cold. A professor brazenly using dark magic, fiendfire no less. The Aurors from the ministry had just been in this house, and yet here he was using such methods to control someone's life. Fury and disgust warred with a sinking, bitter certainty. The Aurors must have been bought off. Of course he would bribe them. Everyone had been fooled by him. Even Dumbledore had to be fooled to let a man like that teach at Hogwarts. Planting a fiendfire seed to control life and death, that was worse than you-know-who. He was a new Dark Lord. How many lives had he controlled with this? Rita felt she'd finally seen his true face, and the discovery almost made her collapse. She rose and began to smash everything within reach, fists and broomsticks lashing out at lamps and vases, something raw and animalistic pounding out of her. Yet even in her rage, she avoided the sofa where he had sat and the little table he had used, as if some instinct told her not to touch them. Only when exhaustion left her with nothing else to wreck did she drag herself to the table. Reason edged back in as anger cooled. She didn't have her wand. Even so, she resolved, if it cost her life, to clear away that table and sofa, then use every contact she'd built over the years to find powerful witches and wizards who could remove the seed from her heart. The thought made her gnash her teeth. "Sebastian," she hissed, "once I get this thing out of me, I'll ruin you." She froze as she reached the table. The beetle-shaped ice sculpture that hadn't shown a sign of melting a moment before had turned into a puddle. The water moved across the tabletop like living ink and spelled out 2 lines. Friendly reminder, I am confident no wizard can detect the seed in your heart. The crucial question is, do you have enough opportunities to check? Cold spread through her limbs. Some unknown magic watched her. As soon as she thought of fighting back, a warning was given. Dazed, a warmth bloomed in her chest. She collapsed back to the floor, clutching her heart and whispering through shaking lips, "I was wrong. I won't do it again." Meanwhile, Sebastian had finished dinner, sprawled on his sofa at home, contentedly watching television. He wondered whether that fool Rita would ever dare to provoke him again. The memory of her terrified face tasted like an icy drink to him. He felt utterly refreshed. He found her despicable, but not worth dirtying his hands over. The seed in her heart had not been anything like fiendfire. It was a modified incendio, a charm that glowed and gave off heat. Calling it a fiendfire seed was theatrics, a small spell doing a big job. Rita, with her flair for the dramatic, would believe him outright. With Dolores cooperating in the performance and the trigger he'd left on the beetle ice sculpture, she would make sure to steer clear of him for a good long while. He adjusted the cushion behind his head and enjoyed the evening. The following days passed quietly. Halloween, usually the sort of day that invited trouble in the original timeline, was unexpectedly peaceful. The feast tables in the Great Hall were piled with sweets, and the unlimited refills of cola delighted the younger students for hours. December came, and the weather in Britain turned gray and cold. People on London's streets wrapped themselves in thick coats. Sebastian had already arranged for the house elves to fire up the alchemical heating devices that had been donated to Hogwarts. The castle felt as warm as spring. The younger students wore single layers of clothing with thin wizard robes over them in classrooms and libraries. They only put on heavy coats for trips to the greenhouses in herbology or when attending care of magical creatures. Even at Quidditch matches, spectators often held their coats in their hands. The stands had been refitted, not just with protective wards, but with heating and cooling alchemical systems so the audience could enjoy the game without discomfort. Around the castle, clusters of young wizards chatted excitedly about the recent match. Krum from Durmstrang is amazing. He's only in 3rd year and already pulls off the Wronski feint. I'll admit he's strong, but Charlie did well too. When Charlie and Krum dove toward the ground, I thought they were going to collide. Lucky Charlie read his opponent in time. Our players have improved so much. We pressured them the whole match, completely different from when we played Beauxbatons. True, but Durmstrang fought back hard. Even when they were 100 points down, they never lost their cool. This match was really exciting. Durmstrang played well, but we were the stronger side. Also, Charlie was lucky. Right? Who'd have thought a post owl would fly onto the pitch and nearly run into Charlie at full speed? If that hadn't happened, who knows who'd have caught the snitch? Thinking about that owl still cracks me up. I swear it looked like it was cursing as it flew off. With this match, Durmstrang beat Beauxbatons in November, and we beat Durmstrang now. If nothing unexpected happens, we're the favorites. I'm confident for the next matches. I think we can win 2 in a row and make the finals. The next one isn't until spring, though, and it's an away game. I'm so jealous of the cheerleaders getting to travel. Heh, I'm on the squad. I heard Beauxbatons has lots of beauties. Can't wait to make friends. The roomful of students laughed and scolded the flirt for getting off topic. Sebastian sat alone in his office, a letter on his desk. He picked it up and read the small note written on the lower right corner of the envelope. Sender, Mr. White. Chapter 47. The Concept of Wizards. Sebastian looked at the letter in his hand and smiled wryly. He had never expected that the very owl that delivered his letter was the cause of Hogwarts losing the match. The bird had been so startled it hadn't dared land near the stands. It only gave the letter to him once he was back in his office. He broke the wax seal on the envelope, drew out the paper, and read slowly. Dear Sebastian, long time no see. I hope you are enjoying life as a professor. After a long period of preparation and handling various tedious procedures, the company has finally gotten on track. Although the process wasn't easy, it has finally produced gratifying results. Now, regarding the specific action plan for the next step, I still have some doubts, so I desperately need your opinions and suggestions. I hope you can come to London as soon as possible so we can discuss the company's future together. I believe that with our combined efforts, one day we will see the blueprint you envisioned. Your loyal friend, Mr. White. P.S. Please do not reply by owl. I would be very troubled if the employees saw it. Sebastian smiled faintly at the letter, stood and stepped into the fireplace, arriving at his villa on the outskirts of London. He phoned White and arranged to meet for dinner. At 6:30 p.m., he was waiting at a villa door and pressed the bell. A man who looked to be in his early 30s opened the gate. Welcome, Sebastian. White greeted him with a warm hug and guided him inside, complaining as they walked. You're the laziest, running off to be a professor at Hogwarts and leaving this huge company to me. How can you be so relaxed? Ha ha, the world keeps turning no matter who's around, Sebastian replied with a hearty laugh. Besides, what else could I worry about with you in charge? Come on, since you're finally here, if you don't explain exactly what to do next, I won't let you leave. No problem, let's talk over dinner. They entered the dining room. Sebastian glanced around at the sparsely decorated villa and teased. Your place is a bit bare. Haven't you thought about finding a mistress for the villa? Or another master even? At the very least, hire 2 servants. White, half amused, half exasperated, laughed and shot back. Sebastian, if I didn't have serious business to discuss with you, I'd kick you out right now. Can't all this delicious food shut you up? You're annoying the moment you arrive. Then I'll leave, Sebastian said with a grin, pretending to stand. White didn't act on the threat. He simply sat and watched Sebastian's antics. Seeing that White wouldn't throw him out, Sebastian pulled out a chair and sat. They ate until they were full. Afterwards, White took out a cigar, lit it, blew a smoke ring, and fixed Sebastian with a serious look. Wizard Pictures and Wizard Publishing House have both been established. Explain the next steps in the plan thoroughly, he said. And I still can't help but ask, why insist on using the name Wizard? Aren't you worried the Ministry of Magic will come looking for trouble? Sebastian wasn't worried at all. He leaned back, sipped his cola, and began to explain. The concept of a wizard didn't suddenly appear out of nowhere. In the Muggle world, legends of wizards, werewolves, vampires, and the like have been passed down for centuries. Wizards are part of many cultures and myths. In medieval Europe, they were often portrayed as figures with mysterious powers, casting spells, seeing the future, wielding supernatural abilities. Merlin in the Arthurian legends is the classic example, wise, magical, indispensable to King Arthur. Beyond wizards, mysterious creatures like werewolves and vampires are entrenched in folklore. Werewolves are a staple of European tales, creatures who change into wolves at the full moon, gaining terrifying strength and speed. 19th century stories emphasized that duality, human by day, beast by night. Vampires, too, are deeply rooted in Eastern European lore. Bram Stoker's 1897 novel made Count Dracula the archetype of the bloodthirsty vampire, a figure that shaped later literature and film. Perhaps before the 17th century, Muggles feared true wizards. With the Church's support, witch hunts intensified until the International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy forced our world out of the Muggles' view. But those legends of wizards, werewolves, vampires remained embedded in Muggle culture through oral tradition, records, and literature. Over the centuries, Muggles have outgrown that fear and turned the idea into fantasy. Muggle authors have created dazzling new worlds that make people fall in love with the concept of magic. Sebastian set his glass down. Haven't you read Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings? That's a Muggle's creation. It has powerful wizards, but the image of a wizard in that book is different from our reality. White hesitated. That's true. It's a different image from us. Isn't that a good thing? Sebastian smiled confidently. Who can define what a wizard should look like? You? Me? Countless Muggle authors? Everyone, wizard and Muggle alike, has their own idea of what a wizard is. The image of a wizard is inherently diverse. He leaned forward. The point of Wizard Publishing House is to attract Muggle writers, to have them create new visions of wizards. Wizard Pictures exists to bring those images to the big screen, to make Muggles care about the wizards they see in films, and through that, make them more receptive to the idea of our community. If a distinctive image unique to our world appears in Muggle media, it will blend into the many other images of wizards out there. And don't worry about the Ministry. Can it control Muggles' literary works? What do the wizards created by Muggle authors have to do with the wizards in our world? Sebastian spread his hands. You live in the Muggle world as a Muggle. You run a Muggle company using Muggle methods, and you hire Muggles to film works written by Muggles. Everything is totally Muggle. Why fear the Ministry? He paused, then added more playfully, Oh, since we're talking about Muggle identities. Sebastian straightened and looked White in the eyes. It's been 11 years. Aren't you going to reclaim your wizard identity and your real surname, White? White smirked. Of course. Or, if you'd prefer, I could call you by another name in private. Sebastian grinned. Black. Hearing the familiar name, White fell into a rare silence, lost in thought. He didn't speak. He simply drew on his cigar, exhaling slow, steady puffs. Sebastian didn't hurry him. He watched White smoke in quiet. The man in front of him had another identity in the magical world. He was from the famous House of Black, Regulus Black, the youngest son, and brother to Sirius. In the original story, he had joined Lord Voldemort's ranks, but never committed any great cruelty. Regulus followed Voldemort at 16, driven by family loyalty and the promise of pure blood glory. Later, he came to hate Voldemort's brutality. He realized his ideals were wrong and resolved to oppose the Dark Lord. In the end, he tried to destroy Voldemort's Horcrux and paid with his life. Sebastian had always been fond of Regulus, the tragic figure from the old tale, and after Regulus enrolled, he had made a point of befriending him. Their similar temperaments drew them together. They became friends who could speak openly. It was ironic. Because of Snape, Sebastian and Sirius hadn't gotten along. When Regulus and Sebastian grew close, Sirius was displeased, and the brothers argued about it. Sebastian tried to stop Regulus from joining the Death Eaters, but the House of Black had been one of the earliest families to sign on with Voldemort. They were firmly committed. After Sirius openly opposed Voldemort and was disowned, the House of Black occupied an awkward position among the Loyalists. For the sake of the family and the pure-blood prestige Voldemort promised, Regulus still went over to the other side. Publicly, he and Sebastian were enemies. Privately, they kept in touch. To truly know a person, Sebastian had told Regulus, you shouldn't only listen to his words, you watch what he does. Regulus remembered that. Still, he was seduced for a time by Voldemort's vision of a pure-blood future, until he discovered the truth. Voldemort had no future for pure bloods in his heart. Everything Voldemort did was for power and tyranny. The collapse of his ideals plunged Regulus into despair. With Voldemort at his height and the House of Black so deeply involved, he felt helpless. He came to Sebastian and poured out his fear. Sebastian still remembered Regulus weeping with remorse. He had no easy solution. Regulus wasn't alone in his choices. His mother was a fervent supporter of Voldemort, and if Regulus defected, the family would suffer. Sebastian knew Regulus well enough to know what he would do. To save his friend, he said the only thing he could. If one day you discover you know whose secret to immortality, don't try to handle it alone. I'll help you shoulder it. Then Sebastian took another precaution. He quietly found Regulus's house elf, Creature, and arranged for him to seek help if Regulus ran into danger. When Regulus did discover Voldemort's secret and went to deal with the Horcrux himself, Creature came to Sebastian in tears and led him to the cave. Regulus was being dragged into the water by Inferi. At the critical moment, Sebastian rescued him. Regulus, faced with the Inferi filling the lake, heartsick and finished with being Voldemort's accomplice, begged Sebastian, after getting Creature's reluctant consent, to erase the house elf's memories and send him back to the Black family. Sebastian took Regulus away and treated the damage the potion and dark magic had done to his body. Though his wounds healed, Regulus was hollowed by trauma. Healing a heart takes more than medicine. Sebastian painted Regulus a new blueprint, a future where wizards no longer hid, where they could live openly and honestly. Regulus was attracted to that dream. He brightened. Under Sebastian's plan, he left the magical world, adopting a Muggle identity. For 11 years, he hardly returned, only once to see his mother on her deathbed, and then he remained in the Muggle world, helping Sebastian run businesses. By the time the cigar burned down to the filter, Regulus sighed deeply. Just call me White. Black died 11 years ago. He died in that cold, damp cave full of Inferi. He let the words drop, and for the first time in a long while, his voice carried relief. Maybe one day I'll take the Black name back, but not now. I really like the future you painted for me. It's my new ideal. He pushed aside his earlier despondency and spoke with renewed resolve. I want wizards to live openly under the sun. I've been working toward that. And I like this Muggle life. I enjoy what I'm doing. Sebastian hesitated, then asked, What about Creature? Do you want his memories restored so he can look after you? Creature. Regulus's voice softened. I feel for him, even though he agreed when I erased his memories. But let him think I'm dead. He doesn't have to care for anyone now. Maybe he can live easier. Besides, I'm a Muggle now. A house elf wouldn't fit my life. When I take up my wand again and reclaim the Black name, I'll restore his memories and bring him back. Regulus straightened, eyes fixed on Sebastian. All right, no more about me. There's a saying among Muggles, time is money. Let's talk about the company, development, and plans. My friend, Chapter 49, Regulus's Efforts. When the conversation turned to the company's development, Regulus immediately brightened. In the past 2 years, after receiving ample funding, we've helped a great number of Muggles enter finance, mining, energy, computing, and manufacturing. These agents don't know about one another. They don't keep in contact. We stay behind the scenes and don't interfere with their development. The ventures we back have had wins and losses, but overall, they're growing rapidly. And about that list you gave me earlier, I've made major investments in a number of Muggle firms worldwide, like Microsoft, Apple, and so on. But your list has some problems. Many of the companies you mentioned haven't even been founded yet. Amazon, Google, Facebook. Sebastian smiled knowingly. Of course those companies didn't exist yet. It was only 1990. Amazon wouldn't appear until 1994, Google in 1998, and Facebook much later. Listing them now was simply a precaution. Watch the founders, be ready, and seize opportunities when they arose. If possible, acquiring them ahead of time wouldn't be out of the question. No problem at all with the list, he said. Sebastian's smile became mysterious. That list was given to me by a master of prophecy. Keep an eye on the founders of the companies on it. The moment any of them plans to start a company, we move decisively. In just a few years, Muggle money will flow steadily into our coffers. You're always so mysterious. Regulus sounded a little helpless. I don't even know where you found that master of prophecy. I trust the list, Regulus added, thinking of the profits already returned by their investments. So our role with these companies is as cash cows, Don't interfere, just take the money. And the real estate we bought, surely you didn't buy that land to grow crops. Our agents in the East are asking for a general plan. As a member of the Transmigration Army, Sebastian knew the value of land. The next 2 or 3 decades would see a real estate boom. Land prices would rise many times over. But he had no intention of running a routine real estate business. He didn't care for money for its own sake. He made money to develop the magical world. Those lands had other, grander purposes. These lands will be very useful, Sebastian said, raising an eyebrow. Think Wizard Pictures and Wizard Publishing House. We'll adapt Muggle classics for the big screen. Once those works and characters are entrenched in their culture, we will build a grand magical world inside the Muggle world. Regulus's eyes lit up. We can learn from Disneyland and build our own unique magic theme park. Exactly. Sebastian smiled confidently. That's the aim of our global land purchases. A magic theme park is a win-win. It's not only important to us, it benefits Muggle governments, tax revenue, large numbers of good jobs, and tourism. I believe Muggle governments will grant us preferential policies. Then those Muggle governments become our strongest allies in promoting ideas like wizardry and magic, he continued smoothly. Our magic parks must be bigger, flashier, more luxurious, and more fun, paired with films, TV, and merchandise, dolls, clothes, armor. We'll use entertainment to infiltrate culture. Within 10 years, the idea of wizards will be globally popular. That's the first step toward breaking the international statute of wizarding secrecy. Imagine Muggles dressing in wizard robes as a trend, Sebastian went on. Once that happens, we wizards can appear in the Muggle world whenever we please. Truth and fiction will blur. When we wear robes, Muggles will assume we're just cosplaying characters from films and TV rather than real wizards. Right now, we have to mimic Muggle clothing to avoid attention. This reverses that entirely. Regulus slapped his thigh, excited. Brilliant, subtle, and mutually beneficial. I knew trusting you was the right choice. Sebastian felt a brief glow at the praise. Of course, this is only the first step. The rest will be much harder. It could go smoothly, or it could lead to bloody conflict. Regulus hesitated for a beat, then his expression hardened. Whatever happens, we're not afraid of a challenge. We can make preparations. Sebastian's tone turned almost playful. We can operate behind the scenes and support Muggle political parties that are friendly to us. If conflict breaks out, we can win one side and use force to deter another. Money, health, power, they will always win some Muggles over. Regulus sighed with admiration. Sebastian, your vision is far-reaching. Compared with you, the Dark Lord's ideology and methods seem ridiculous. Conquer everything by force? Ha! Sebastian thought differently. The world's essence is survival of the fittest. The winner writes history. The Muggle world had many examples. The first emperor of the East united the land and is remembered as a great achiever. The little mustache of Europe tried to conquer Europe and failed, becoming the villain in history. Compared to the Muggle world, the magical world is even more subject to change at the hands of the powerful. In hindsight, the Dark Lord's ideology sounded simplistic, but had he won, he might have been hailed as a savior. He hadn't been strong enough then. People like Dumbledore still opposed him. Sebastian disliked the Dark Lord's philosophy, and so he had joined the camp against him, contributing to the magical world's peace. Although the magical world is small, its politics are complex, Sebastian told Regulus. Don't worry, I'll handle matters here. The Muggle world is entrusted to you. Whatever you do will require sufficient financial backing. Regulus was brimming with confidence. Don't worry, the Muggle world is mine. I won't let you down. I'll work hard for the future of the magical world. Come on, enough generalities, Sebastian urged. Tell me the concrete plans for Wizard Pictures and Wizard Publishing House. Those are 2 major projects you're personally responsible for. Don't hold anything back. Of course, Sebastian would do his best to fulfill Regulus's request. After all, this was the most crucial step in their plan for the Muggle world. That was why the other projects were mostly about supporting Muggle agents and letting them develop on their own. Wizard Pictures and Wizard Publishing House, however, were to be personally overseen by Regulus. Sebastian rolled up his sleeves, drew his wand, and cleared the dining table. He produced a roll of parchment, spread it flat, and used an enlargement charm until it covered the entire table. Then he took a quill and began to draw a mind map across the surface. Seeing Sebastian get to work, Regulus brightened and hurried to stand beside him, peering to see what he was writing. As he wrote, Sebastian explained, "Let's start with Wizard Publishing House." As the rule makers, Wizard Publishing House can issue regular recruitment themes and solicit submissions from around the world. The genres can be adventure, romance, action, mystery, anything related to fantasy. As long as they're excellent fantasy works, we'll accept them all. Sebastian clenched his fist, ambition clear in his voice. We want to make Wizard Publishing House the holy land for fantasy lovers in the Muggle community. He drew 2 branches beneath the publishing house heading. We need to split it into 2 parts, physical publishing and digital publishing. And each of those will be roughly divided into a male-oriented team for men and a female-oriented team for women. The physical publishing side will follow traditional rules, but the digital side is an emerging field. Sebastian shaded the digital publishing branch heavily. The internet is booming. We must seize the vast opportunities it offers. Physical books have long cycles, high barriers, and slow returns. Digital books are different. We can lower the threshold. Relying on memories from his previous life, Sebastian sketched out what an e-book site should look like. We want to build the largest e-book platform where authors from all over the world can publish. On the internet, information spreads fast, so authors' success comes quickly too. They don't need top-tier literary skill. So long as the story is exciting and the language accessible, it will work. Oh, and he remembered a detail and turned to Regulus. We should set up branch companies for Wizard Pictures and Wizard Publishing House in different regions. That will open a multilingual market. Many countries don't use English. Sebastian straightened and detailed the web novel operating model he'd seen before. The 2 of them talked, asked, and answered until Regulus had a solid grasp of the plan. I almost forgot, Sebastian said, rubbing his head and surveying the densely written parchment. Don't forget Wizard Pictures. Wizard Publishing House and Wizard Pictures will have great synergy. E-books that perform well can be printed as physical books. Those that perform exceptionally can be adapted into films or TV series. Regulus felt his head spin from the flood of ideas and asked for a break, lighting another cigarette to clear his thoughts. At that moment, his admiration for Sebastian felt like a torrent, unending and overwhelming. How did this man know so much? He spoke with such clarity and logic. A person who has spent all his time in the magical world knew more about modern Muggle industries than Regulus, who had always lived in the Muggle world. Sebastian must have learned a great deal during his travels in the Russian Muggle world. Regulus took a long drag and stared at the parchment, replaying Sebastian's explanations like a movie to make sure he hadn't missed anything. When he was satisfied, he handed Sebastian several documents with a proud smile. I bought the rights to all those classic works you named, just as you asked. It cost a fortune. These are copies of the acquisition contracts. Have a look. This one's for The Lord of the Rings. This one's for The Hobbit. This one's for The Chronicles of Narnia. Regulus presented each contract as if they were treasured family heirlooms. I've also been keeping an eye on a few Muggle authors you mentioned. According to the prophecy you gave me, they'll write things like Twilight and A Song of Ice and Fire. Even if those works don't exist yet, as soon as they begin, I'll buy the rights. For a moment he looked baffled. Can prophecies be this precise? Aren't they supposed to be vague? He wondered if he'd been given a fake prophecy course. He had to know where Sebastian had found such a powerful prophet. Excellent, Sebastian said, giving a thumbs up. He praised Regulus's efficiency. With those copyrights, Wizard Pictures wouldn't be short of material for the next 20 years, works that had already been market-tested in his previous life, each stronger than the last. Sebastian could already picture Wizard Pictures rising to prominence. To be honest, Regulus said, a little moved, these works are all fantastic. I've been staying up late reading them. Choosing the first project for Wizard Pictures is critical. We need to be very careful, but I'm overwhelmed with options and can't decide. What do you think, Sebastian? Simple, Sebastian replied, eyes bright with confidence. For the first project, choose The Lord of the Rings. I recommend a director, Peter Jackson. He wrote Peter Jackson's name on the parchment and instructed Regulus, you must get him at any cost. If he wants money, give him money. If he wants people, give him people. Do whatever it takes to keep him. Seeing Regulus frown, Sebastian patted his shoulder. He's extremely talented. Trust me, he will make it perfect. Once the film is a hit, we'll establish ourselves in the Muggle film industry. Then everything we've done will be meaningful. After that, we'll launch all kinds of merchandise, posters, plush toys, collector's items, things fans can't resist. We can also produce animated films for children. Kids' imaginations are full of fantasy, and they're a natural market. And don't forget games. Find a strong game company and adapt it into a top computer game. The electronic game market has limitless potential. Regulus's eyes lit up. He nodded eagerly at every idea, like someone who had wandered a desert and finally seen an oasis. He memorized every word Sebastian said and every note he wrote, feeling Sebastian was the guiding light through the darkness. All right, I'll do it. I'll assemble an animation team. As for game companies, I remember we invested in Ubisoft. We can hand it over to them. Oh, Sebastian, do you have any strong suggestions for works from the magical world? Our ultimate goal is to bring magical world stories to the big screen so Muggles can learn about the magical realm through film. Sebastian glanced at the clock on the wall, already 11:30 p.m. He tossed the quill onto the table. The long session had made his neck stiff. He slowly rolled his shoulders, easing the discomfort. No rush on that yet, he said. Let's first open up the Muggle market completely. We're true Slytherins. We must be patient. But don't worry. Once we make a splash, I'll introduce you to a wizard. He's currently the most famous author in the magical world. His works fit our themes perfectly. Sebastian stretched and smiled at Regulus. He's very interested in becoming famous in the Muggle world. You should have heard of him. His name is Gilderoy Lockhart. Chapter 51, Model Employee Lockhart. Gilderoy Lockhart? Regulus murmured the name twice. He had been away from the magical world for a long time and wasn't very familiar with its people. He frowned, rubbed his right temple, and tried desperately to remember who this was. The name sounded so familiar. Who could it be? Here's a hint, Sebastian said, holding back a little. When we were at Hogwarts, we met a very special fellow. Very, very special. Very special? The hint conjured a specific image in Regulus's mind. I know, he said, clenching his right fist and tapping it against his left palm as realization dawned. That Ravenclaw boy who loved showing off. He enrolled when I was in my 4th year, Regulus recalled, but his grades were mediocre, his abilities mediocre, and other than loving attention and putting on a show, there was nothing special about him. Sebastian smiled mysteriously. You've misjudged him. How so? His way with words is exceptional. Apart from being obsessed with fame and fortune, he really is a rare talent. All right, it's getting late. Sebastian stood and prepared to leave. I'll introduce him properly when the time is right. Oh, and here's a secret. His memory charm is exquisite. If you run into competitors who don't play fair, I can have Lockhart suggest a little thought in their heads. A small suggestion that they stop bothering you. How does that sound? All right, all right. Regulus steered Sebastian toward the door. Go home. Your wife Mia must be waiting. As for me, I'll try to handle problems the Muggle way. Of course, I'm not completely inflexible. If I meet truly disgusting fellows, I'll ask for your help. After he got home, Sebastian didn't wash up and go to bed right away. He went to his study, picked up the letter Lockhart had written, and read it again. Lockhart was talented, but vain and obsessed with grand gestures. Sebastian had to check his work constantly to make sure there were no mistakes. He'd always been curious about how the Sorting Hat had put Lockhart in Ravenclaw. Someone so fixated on fame felt like a Slytherin through and through. Sebastian had watched Lockhart for 3 years. Unlike the academically driven Ravenclaws, Lockhart didn't seem to care about knowledge. He spent his days dreaming of fame, boasting, or planning some dramatic news. Students avoided him, and even professors were irritated. If Sebastian hadn't remembered details from his previous life, he might have dismissed Lockhart as useless. But he vividly recalled that in the original stories, besides possessing a powerful memory charm, Lockhart was a very famous writer. In his previous life's fandom, whenever Lockhart was mentioned, people talked about his memory charm and his reputation as a charlatan. Few remembered his success as an author. It was true that many of the tales in Lockhart's books were stolen, but people overlooked how skillfully he turned those stories into thrilling, readable forms that required real talent. Sebastian had long had his eye on Lockhart, intending to bring him under his wing. After Lockhart graduated, Sebastian arranged for Lockhart's movements to be watched. He knew Lockhart wouldn't be content to fade into obscurity. When Lockhart went to Armenia and made a move against an elderly Armenian wizard, Sebastian intercepted him. Subduing Lockhart had been simple, some pressure, some temptation, and under Sebastian's coercion and inducements, Lockhart agreed to work for him. Now Lockhart was not only the most famous writer in the magical world, but also the head of Swann Media. Early the next morning, Sebastian rushed to Swann Media. He needed to see Lockhart and give him a stern talking to. This was a critical stage for the company's development, and Lockhart needed watching. The moment he saw him, Sebastian felt a headache coming on. Lockhart was undeniably talented, but he was excessively flamboyant. Left unwatched for 2 months, he could spark a scandal. Sebastian, Lockhart greeted him with a beaming smile. The winner of Wizard Weekly's Most Charming Smile has come to welcome you personally. Aren't you honored? Lockhart kept angling his face, displaying what he thought was his most charming smile. Sebastian ignored the display, walked straight past him, and headed to Lockhart's office. How's the filming of Wandering with Werewolves going? What's the situation? Is it finished? At the mention of his work, Lockhart lit up. He didn't look tired at all. He'd barely sat down before he popped back up, bounding around the office. I adapted Wandering with Werewolves into a 36-episode series myself. I'm directing it, and I'm starring in it. Once it airs on magical television, I'll be the hottest star in the magical world. Stop, 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 Sebastian said, hands up, speechless as he watched Lockhart jump. Sit down and speak properly. It's already wrapped. We're in the final editing stage. Oh, can you look at some promotional photos for me? Lockhart leapt up again and posed in front of Sebastian. See? Doesn't this make me look tall and handsome? Doesn't this make me look like a lone hero? Or maybe we should use my smile as the selling point. Sebastian, for reasons he couldn't explain, perhaps prejudice, found Lockhart's posing painful to watch, not handsome. He forced a smile, waved a hand, and praised him briskly. All look fine. Pick one yourself. Or make several versions, and remember to do posters for the other actors. Don't hog all the beauty. Good idea, Lockhart exclaimed. My performance will impress the audience. The smile dropped from Lockhart's face, and he turned plaintive, bringing up old complaints. It's just a pity. None of the characters' names are mine. They're all fictional. If you hadn't stopped me back then, I would have altered that old Armenian wizard's memory and put the story under my name. There would have been no need to give him a large payment. Now everyone sees me only as a writer, not as a powerful wizard. Lockhart clasped his hands together and pleaded theatrically. Help me, Sebastian. I want everyone to think I'm a powerful wizard. I want to be more famous. Sebastian glanced at Lockhart helplessly. How many drinks had he had? How could someone so famous and so powerful have so little self-awareness? Don't bring up old stories, Lockhart slurred, waving a hand. I've heard that so many times my ears are numb. I've always said anything that can be fixed with galleons isn't a problem, he went on, suddenly brightening. This partnership model is perfect. We provide the galleons, others provide the stories, and you just turn them into art. That way everyone's happy, especially you. Your fame is honestly earned now. You're rich and famous. What else could you possibly want? Not enough, Lockhart roared, lunging forward and clenching his fists. He stared at Sebastian with desperate intensity. Not enough. I want to be even more famous. I still don't have an Order of Merlin. I want to go down in history. I want the history of magic to devote a whole page to me. Sebastian sighed and rolled his eyes. Strength can't be faked. Stealing other people's memories will eventually be exposed. You don't want to be found out and lose everything, do you? Lockhart's face went pale. He slumped back into his chair, voice small. You promised me, as long as I followed your lead, I'd be made famous, both in the wizarding world and the muggle world. Actually, that's not impossible. Sebastian folded his arms casually. Fame in the Muggle world will take longer, but in the wizarding world we can arrange something sooner. First, think about what you're actually good at. Smiling? Acting? Writing? Lockhart listed with a puzzled air. Writing, Sebastian said, slapping the table for emphasis. Lockhart jumped. I remember your school essays. In your earlier years you were brilliant. Professors loved your pieces. The nonsense only crept in later when your knowledge couldn't keep up with your style. Lockhart waved a hand indignantly. That's slander. Sebastian's tone sobered. After I became a professor, I noticed a serious problem at Hogwarts. First years don't know how to write essays. The teachers struggle because the students haven't had that training before they enroll. So I want to open a writing class at Hogwarts specifically for first years, a 2-month course. He looked at Lockhart meaningfully. As for the candidate to teach it, me. Lockhart perked up instantly, all dejection gone. He pointed at himself like a child volunteering for a prize. Becoming a Hogwarts professor, that was a dream he'd barely dared to imagine. Guiding first years in writing would be perfect, simple, high profile, and a yearly boost to his reputation. There's no one more suitable than me. Don't worry, Sebastian said, emphasizing the words. You're one of ours. I'll prioritize you. Lockhart straightened up, eager and obedient. To take on greater responsibilities, you must prove you're capable, Sebastian continued, voice low. You'll have to accomplish something first. Lockhart pounded his chest. I'll go through fire and water, brother. Swann Media has been up for more than half a year, but the daily profit still overshadows us. I'll make Swann Media surpass the profit in 6 months. And you mustn't neglect film and television, Sebastian added. They need to be both high quality and plentiful. Do you have the confidence for that? Lockhart hesitated only a moment before setting his jaw. He wouldn't let this chance slip away. Sebastian was generous to his own people. Deliver on the task, and Lockhart's fame would rise. He burst into a torrent of plans. We'll postpone the broadcast of Wandering with Werewolves to coincide with Hogwarts' Christmas break. Start at 8 p.m. every night, 2 back-to-back episodes, so students get home and drag their parents in to watch. We'll also provide entertainment for the kids who stay at school. Put it on the enchanted screens in the Great Hall so they won't be bored. In one holiday, we'll secure a huge number of loyal viewers. And our slogan, Wandering with Werewolves, 8 p.m. Every night, see you there. Sebastian watched him talk, feeling a mix of amusement and genuine admiration. Lockhart had many flaws, and his methods were often misguided, but he never gave up trying. If one route failed, he'd try another. If an opportunity appeared, he seized it. Too many people crumbled at the first setback, grew lazy and resentful. Lockhart, for all his vanity and folly, was indefatigable. There was something valuable in that stubbornness, a willingness to find a place where one could shine. Lockhart kept outlining tactics and taglines, and Sebastian listened, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. If the man could be steered, the plan might just work. Gilderoy Lockhart really was talented. Driven by fame and fortune, he threw himself into his work with a passion like no other. To compete with the Daily Prophet, he launched morning and evening news broadcasts, and in just over 10 days, he had even copied Muggle television channels and rolled out several flashy magical programs. His efficiency stunned Sebastian. At times he wondered if Lockhart had been using a time-turner. To curry favor with the Ministry of Magic, Lockhart created a dedicated channel for the ministry's announcements. Minister Fudge was delighted and personally helped promote it. Propelled by an array of entertaining shows, Swann Media exploded in popularity. With the broadcast of Wandering with Werewolves, its ascent became unstoppable. By the middle of the Christmas holidays, Swann Media had overtaken the Daily Prophet. What had once been a luxury for Quidditch fans, a magical television, had become an essential item in nearly every wizarding home. Even the not-so-wealthy Mr. Weasley, after persistent pleading from his children, reluctantly bought one. Mrs. Weasley had been opposed at first, but once the television arrived, she quickly became a devoted viewer. Every evening at 8, she was faithfully in front of the screen for Wandering with Werewolves. When the holidays ended and Hogwarts reopened, most of the younger students were eagerly talking about the show. The few pupils who lived with Muggle families listened blankly. then tried to piece together the plot from scraps of conversation. No one seemed to be talking about Quidditch anymore. Everyone was talking about television. Days slipped by smoothly, and Sebastian began to think the new term would pass in calm and peace. Then, on March 31st, 1991 Easter, everything changed. After a long, exhausting day, he lay on his bed, bones aching, ready to sleep, when his undetectable extension charm bag began to vibrate violently. An emergency contact? He leapt up, grabbed the bag, and pulled out a small, ornate box. Inside was a two-way mirror, vibrating and humming. A voice came through, urgent and anxious. "Professor Swann, I'm George. Something's happened. Please come quickly. George Weasley? Where are you?" Sebastian asked. He was surprised. That mirror should have been in Professor Snape's hands. How had George got it? "I'm in your office, Professor. Fred's been taken." Sebastian didn't hesitate. He dressed at astonishing speed, shoved the bag away, and apparated straight to his office. Green flames flared, and he stood in the room in an instant. "Professor, you're here!" George burst forward as soon as Sebastian appeared. He was shaking, eyes wild. "Please, don't panic. Slow down and tell me everything," Sebastian said calmly. George's words tumbled out in a rush. "Fred and I were out for a walk tonight and saw Professor Robert acting strange. It was like he was trying not to be seen. We followed him, and he left the castle, heading toward the Forbidden Forest. Fred wanted to go after him, but I was worried about Snape finding us, so I stayed by the castle entrance with the Marauder's map. When Fred got close to the edge of the forest, he got hit by a spell and was knocked down. Then he was dragged into the forest." George's face tightened as he recalled the moment. "I ran to find Professor Snape. After I told him what happened, he gave me the key to your office and this mirror so I could contact you. He told me to wait here for you." Sebastian felt a helpless little ache in his chest at the boy's recklessness. 2 second years trying to tail a professor? Brave, certainly. Foolish, definitely. Still, it was a relief that only Fred had gone after the man and that George had kept watch. Otherwise, the situation could have been far worse. Sebastian used a quick bit of magic to check the castle. It was quiet, no other alerts. That meant things weren't yet beyond control, and it was reasonable to hope Snape was already handling it. He took a small vial from the bag and had George drink a calming draught. After a moment, the boy's breathing slowed and his panic eased. He straightened and began to tell the story more clearly. "Don't worry," Sebastian said when George finished. "With Professor Snape involved, Fred will be brought back. Come and sleep here tonight so you'll be nearby if there's any news." He made the office sofa transform into a large, warm bed and pulled bedding from the extension charm bag. "There's a magical television in my office if you want something to pass the time. Try to get some rest. We'll hear something soon." Then, without wasting another second, Sebastian grabbed his broom and launched out the window. He shot across the grounds, angling straight for the Forbidden Forest. He increased his speed until the wind tore at his robes and the world blurred. As he flew, he unleashed a pulse of strong magic to announce his presence to the forest and to warn off anything that might interfere. He stretched his magical senses and followed the trail left by Snape and the others. The undergrowth could not slow him. Trees and brambles flashed past, and his magic surged hotter and wilder as he pressed deeper in. The faster he went, the colder his eyes grew. Dumbledore was away, and someone had picked a dangerous moment to make trouble. Professor Robert had been clever to choose such a time, but cleverness didn't make him any less culpable. Stirring up trouble when Dumbledore's not here, Sebastian thought, voice low and hard. Really know how to pick your moment, Professor Robert. I hope you haven't done anything foolish. Chapter 54. Professor, eat shit. Fred felt like the day had been cursed. To avoid being kicked off the alchemy team by Professor Swann, he and George had been studying themselves raw every day, exhausted. The moment he hit his pillow in the dormitory, he fell into a sleep as deep as a sleeping charm. He hadn't been on a midnight romp around Hogwarts in ages. So when Easter arrived, he and George decided to cut loose and go on a proper late-night adventure. There was an adventure, all right. Whether it was thrilling was another question. His whole body ached. When Professor Robert first dragged him toward the Forbidden Forest, Fred was terrified. In his head, the worst that should happen was a loss of points. After all, he and George had been raking points back into Gryffindor lately. A lecture from Professor McGonagall would have been annoying but survivable. A howler from Mrs. Weasley would sting, but not kill. He never imagined he would be felled by a spell the moment he neared the forest. A professor attacking a student, what sort of mad thing was that? He wanted to yell, but when Robert marched him into the trees, a new fear took hold. The Forbidden Forest was unpredictable. Anything could happen here. So when Robert grabbed his wand and muttered a counter-charm to subdue him, Fred stood up and followed, because the alternative felt even worse. Robert's behavior out here was nothing like his conduct in class. It was darker, literally. With the canopy thick overhead, he couldn't see Robert's face, and that made the situation worse, like a heavy stone on his chest. He simply prayed George would run and fetch a stronger teacher, McGonagall, Flitwick, anyone. Fred was being dragged by the collar, stumbling through brambles. His clothes were already torn. A long cut ran down his left arm from where Robert had sliced him. Every so often, Robert reopened the wound and used his blood in some ritual to determine their direction. Fred burned with resentment. Weren't they always lecturing students about the dangerous beasts that lived in the Forbidden Forest? Centaurs patrolled it and forbade wizards to enter. Werewolves lurked deeper in. Yet the forest felt unnaturally dead. No birdsong, nothing but Robert's low mutterings. "Bad luck for you, little fellow. You ran into me," Robert said, voice too eager. "Don't think about shouting for help. No one can hear you." He snatched a pendant from his collar and held it up like proof. "Look, I bought this at tremendous cost overseas over Christmas. Within 30 meters, it blocks sound and presence. It can even mimic a dragon's aura to keep magical creatures away. Extremely useful in the Forbidden Forest, wouldn't you say?" He shoved the pendant back inside his coat and greedily eyed Fred's arm. "I've been wanting to try this for a long time, but Dumbledore's always had his eye on the school. If you hadn't followed me..." His laugh was too high and frantic. "Merlin's blessing, you're a Gryffindor. I will succeed tonight." Of course, that was why the forest had been so eerily quiet. The pendant kept everything at bay. That explained why no centaur had come to inspect them. It explained the absence of danger. If there had been any beasts around, Fred would surely have been used as bait. He couldn't trust this unhinged professor to save him. After what felt like forever, they reached a place where the trees grew so thick the sky was a sliver. Pushing through a curtain of bushes, Fred stepped into a clearing and saw a massive stone at its center. Robert's eyes flashed. He padded up to it, circled once, then twice, then wrestled Fred up against it. He cut the wound on Fred's arm again and smeared the blood across the stone as if making an offering. He raised his wand and intoned in a strange halting chant. "Sanguine Gryffindorum, ostium hereditatis aperiatur." A gate of yellow light shimmered on the face of the rock. Only when it steadied did Robert relax. "There you are," he whispered, spreading his arms as if embracing a prize. He strode toward the luminous doorway and bounced off it with a dull thud. "What?" He stared at the glowing portal in disbelief. He crashed into it again and again, each time being thrown backward. "I don't believe it. Why can't I get through?" He looked around, eyes wild. It must need more blood. He fixed his gaze on Fred. "You, come here." Fred's stomach dropped. The man had gone mad. If more blood wouldn't open that door, Robert would keep attacking it, maybe asking for more of Fred until there was nothing left. He couldn't just stand there. He faked trembling as he walked forward, while his right hand slipped into his coat pocket and closed around something familiar and foul, a dung bomb. "Hurry up," Robert barked, impatient. Fred counted a breath in his head. 3 steps, 2, 1. He stood in front of the professor, feigning terror, and raised his left arm to display the wound. While Robert's attention was on the slit, Fred slammed the dung bomb against his face with his hidden right hand. "Eat this, you!" he spat, and tore away. He hadn't expected much, just a few chaotic seconds to get away. 5 seconds would do, 10 would be paradise. He sprinted for the scrub to use the cover to his advantage, but he had misjudged the distance between them. 2 strides in, Robert grabbed the back of his robe. Before he could twist free, he was hurled to the ground. Stars exploded behind his eyes. He had no strength left to fight. "Ugh!" he croaked as Robert vomited. Whether from the stench or rage was impossible to tell. Robert hauled him upright by the collar with one hand, while the other held a wand at Fred's face. "You miserable brat," he snarled. "Wouldn't it be simpler to give your blood obediently? Since you don't value your life, then this is your." Enough. A spell burned a red line into the soil beside them. From the bushes, a pale, shadowy figure drifted forward. Professor Snape emerged, wand leveled at Robert, his face unreadable. His voice was cold and cutting. "Tonight's farce ends here. Chapter 55. Snape, let the students go. Come to me." "Professor Snape!" Fred shouted, more astonished than relieved. He had never imagined Severus Snape would be the one to come for him. As a Gryffindor, Fred had plenty of reasons to dislike Snape, his black robes, his deadpan voice, the way he moved. Yet in that moment, Snape looked impossibly cool. Even his black robes were cool. Even his impassive voice was cool. Even the way he pointed his wand seemed cool. Up close, though, Snape looked worse for wear. His breathing was ragged, as if he had been running hard. His robes were torn, hanging in shreds. His trousers were ripped, exposing pale calves. There were sticky, web-like filaments clinging to him. Still, to Fred he glowed, steady, reliable, and impossibly composed. After receiving George's message, Snape had set off into the Forbidden Forest at once. He'd followed a trail as soon as he entered, expecting it to be a straightforward rescue. Instead, the forest had given him every kind of difficulty. Hippogriffs, unicorns, acromantula colonies, centaurs, even a werewolf. None of those creatures posed a real threat to Snape, but they slowed him down, and by the time he found the pair, he was breathless and irritated. From what he could see along the path, there had been no battle. The two had moved through the forest untroubled. Yet he'd had to fight his way past angry animals that had only recently returned to their territories. He had been unlucky. Snape's lips pressed into a thin line. Anyone who knew him would read that as a sign of barely controlled fury. He walked toward them without expression. Robert crouched behind Fred, using him as a shield. One hand clamped over Fred's neck. The other held a wand aimed at Snape as he ranted. "Expelliarmus! Stupefy! Confringo!" Snape didn't stop. He deflected the spells with casual flicks of his wand and fixed Robert with a cold, hollow look. "This ends tonight," he said flatly. "Lower your wand. You are no match for me. Don't waste yourself." A wild grin spread over Robert's face. "Severus Snape, the notorious Death Eater himself," he cackled. "I've waited so long. I've wanted to use the dark arts on you, to make you suffer. Stop. Don't come any closer." Robert pressed his wand so close to Fred's face, Fred could feel its cold tip. "You don't want this little fellow hurt in front of you, do you, Professor Snape?" Snape stopped 2 meters away, like a statue. "Release the student," he said. "You've been given a chance." Robert laughed and then sobbed with manic joy. "A chance?" he repeated. "I admitted I underestimated you. I am no match for you, but you may have forgotten something." His left hand tightened around Fred's throat. The boy gasped. "Lower your wand, or I will use Cruciatus on him." Snape's voice was as steady as ever. "You call me a Death Eater. Do you think I would surrender my wand because you threaten a student? You came for that stone behind you, didn't you?" He nodded toward the boulder Robert was shielding. "Do you imagine it will survive your attack intact?" Robert faltered. The boulder was connected to Gryffindor. It shouldn't be easy to destroy. He had already thrown everything he had into taking it. His money, his plans. He could not afford to lose what he had worked for. He was terrified of enraging Snape into shattering the stone, and so couldn't bring himself to hurt Fred. The two men stared at each other, and for a long moment, nothing moved. Fred decided he would have to act for himself. He winked at Snape to get his attention, then slowly slipped his right hand into his pocket. His fingers closed around the last dung bomb. He breathed out and, relying on touch, lobbed it backward over his shoulder. The bomb hit its mark with a wet splat. A stench erupted. Robert instinctively brought his hand to his forehead. A yellowish liquid streamed into his eyes, blurring his sight. Panicking, he shoved Fred violently toward Snape, and with the other hand sent out a vicious spell. Bone-shattering, flesh-gouging. Snape, seeing Fred's wink and then the bomb's impact, read the boy's plan instantly. He lifted his wand to strike, and then saw Fred thrown toward him and Robert's wand flashing with a cruel spell. If he finished Robert now, he would win, but Fred would be hit. There was no time to weigh options. Instinct took over. Snape dispelled the spell in his hand and lunged, shoving Fred aside with force. Pain exploded in his chest. He went down hard, collapsing to the ground. "Professor Snape!" Fred scrambled, heart pounding. He crawled to Snape and hauled him up, leaning him against himself. His palms were sticky and warm. When he looked, he saw blood. "You're bleeding so much," he cried, choking on the sight. Robert, wiping the muck from his eyes, laughed like a madman. "I still won," he crowed. "Severus Snape, I told you I would make you suffer." He raised his wand again. "Crucio!" "Professor Snape!" Fred screamed. A sudden spell cut through the air. A thick wall of ice shot up from the ground between Robert and the two of them, intercepting the Cruciatus. The spell struck the barrier and only scattered tiny crystals. "Sorry," an angry voice called from a distance. "Your attempt to torment Severus Snape will not work." The voice belonged to Sebastian, because your next opponent is me, Professor Robert. Chapter 56. Professor Robert, please me. Before Sebastian finished speaking, he swooped in on a broom and stopped in front of Fred. The terror on Fred's face ebbed as quickly as a tide, replaced by surprise and then relief. "Professor Sebastian is here." Fred's relief lasted only a moment before a new worry took hold. This was the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. Could Sebastian handle him? If McGonagall or Flitwick had come, this would have been easier. "I'm sorry, I'm late," Sebastian said gently as he landed. "Don't worry. Leave the rest to me. Professor, be careful. Professor Robert is a dark wizard. He's using dark magic," Fred warned. "A dark wizard? I used to be an auror," Sebastian answered with a grin. "I haven't had a proper fight in years. I'm itching for it." He produced several potions and pressed them into Fred's hands. "Fred, Professor Snape's safety is in your hands. Give him the bone-healing potion and the blood-replenishing potion. Then smear Bubatuber paste on his chest to stop the bleeding. I'll take care of the rest." Fred, reassured by the news that Sebastian had once been an auror, hurried to Snape's side and forced the blood-replenishing potion between his lips. "Professor Snape, wake up and drink this." Sebastian rose, waved his wand to dispel the ice wall, and turned to Robert with a faintly sinister smile. "Professor Robert, my friend and student are badly hurt. I'm not pleased, so please use all your power, otherwise I might accidentally kill you." Robert laughed, breathless and scornful. "Who do you take yourself for? Dumbledore? Just you, a Muggle studies professor? I was only being kind, letting you and your students catch up. You actually think I'm afraid of you? Come on, let me finish you." He lashed out with dark curses. Bone-shattering, flesh-rending. A blast struck Sebastian's sleeve and scattered a button from his cuff to the ground. Robert smirked. "Protective alchemical charms. Let's see how many you have." He repeated the curses, over and over. The spells hit Sebastian like pebbles thrown at a boulder, having no visible effect. Sebastian brushed dust from his sleeve and looked at Robert with contempt. "Professor Robert, I gave you a chance. You're useless. Your spells are weak, like water from a leaky pipe. They can't even penetrate 2 protective buttons at once." Robert's face went white with fury. If protective gear protected him, he would go after what was on the ground. "Bombarda!" he shouted and hurled a powerful detonation. But as he raised his wand, Sebastian stepped into the path of the spell and with a flick of his wand deflected it aside as if it were nothing. Robert's mouth dropped open. Snape could casually block his spells, sure, but why could this Muggle studies professor do the same? How could a simple teacher be so competent? He had never expected this. Watching the black-haired man stroll toward him, casually parrying each attack with a flick of his wand, Robert's mind went blank. His anger warred with confusion and a creeping fear. He kept throwing spells, vicious, desperate dark magic, but Sebastian merely deflected them without breaking his stride. It shouldn't be like this. You're a businessman, a teacher of Muggle studies, not Defense Against the Dark Arts. Why are you so strong? Cold sweat beaded on Robert's forehead as one thought rose and swallowed everything else. Escape. He tried to apparate. "You can't get away," Sebastian said flatly. "While I cast the freezing charm to protect Snape and the others, I also set up an anti-apparition ward." Robert reacted instantly. He conjured a thick smokescreen and bolted toward the bushes at the clearing's edge, but only 2 steps later felt a terrifying heat from behind. A gigantic dragon of roaring flame ripped through the smokescreen and boxed him in. The way forward was sealed. Thick curtains of fire rose before him and on either side. The heat singed his hair. He spun to face Sebastian, who had closed to within a step, and before he could speak, the grass at his feet thickened and writhed into thumb-thick ropes that bound him. Transfiguration. Silent and complete. Sebastian's voice was level as he looked down at the struggling man. Professor Robert, from what I've learned, you were always allied with Dumbledore. During the last war, you weren't in the Order of the Phoenix, but you stood against the Dark Lord. That should make you upright. Dumbledore wouldn't have asked you to teach at Hogwarts otherwise. Why did you do this? Robert's eyes flashed red like coals as he strained against his bonds like a trapped beast. When he realized escape was hopeless, he raged. Dumbledore is a hypocrite. I trusted him, and my family was ruined. He told us not to use killing curses, and we listened. Meanwhile, Death Eaters were freed time after time by their insiders in the Ministry. Dumbledore could have killed them. If he'd killed them, my family wouldn't have been driven to this. His voice broke with a mixture of grief and fury. We had already won. The Dark Lord was dead because of the Savior. Do you know what it's been like for 10 years? Seeing my family lying in St. Mungo's, watching them suffer, I've lived with that every day. I hated my mercy. So I learned all kinds of dark arts to finish off the surviving Death Eaters. Just one more step. I've found Gryffindor's legacy. Soon, I'll have unmatched power. He stared at Sebastian with a feverish glare. Let me go. We're the same kind of person. I'm doing this to kill evil. Sebastian's expression did not change. He didn't soften. I don't believe you, Professor Robert. I saw Fred's wound. I will get revenge for them. He paused, an almost amused look in his eyes. I wanted to punch you. Spells wouldn't be satisfying enough, but your face is too filthy. I'd soil my hands. From his undetectable extension charm bag, Sebastian produced a beater's bat and held it up, smiling faintly at the terrified man, like a sportsman about to mete out last resort discipline to a dangerous snake. Professor Robert, he said quietly, please hold on. Don't you dare die. After a brutal beating, Sebastian finally let his anger out. He talked a good game, promised to kill every Death Eater, to root out all evil, but talk was cheap. Why hadn't he stormed Azkaban? There were plenty of Death Eaters rotting there. Why not go after Bellatrix or the rest? If he'd taken down a pureblood like Lucius, Sebastian would have applauded him as a hero. Instead, he picked on students. After all these years, Sebastian had never heard of him taking out a single Death Eater from a noble family. If he needed time to grow stronger, fair enough. Attacking students wasn't the way. It was classic cowardice, bullying the weak and fearing the strong. Sebastian dropped the club casually at Fred's feet. Want to hit him a couple of times to get the anger out? Fred stared at Professor Robert, whose face still bore the marks of the duel, distorted and ridiculous, and shook his head so hard his head bobbed like a bell. Professor Swann had been terrifyingly violent, but impressive. He hadn't expected Swann to be so strong. He'd handled Robert like a child. Fred's eyes lit up as he watched, excitement written all over him. He waited for Sebastian to lay out the next move. Sebastian looked down at Severus Snape, who was propped on the ground. Severus, you all right? Can you move? When Sebastian had first arrived, Snape had looked completely spent, chest wounded and unable to speak. The potion Sebastian had given him had stopped the bleeding and stabilized him. The chest injury, mercifully, was only minor. Snape forced a dry smile. I'm fine. It wasn't some mighty curse. No longer a problem. He tried to rise and made a wry joke at Sebastian's expense. I remember you warning me. Arson leads to life imprisonment. He nodded toward the smoldering remnants around them. Why aren't you afraid of life imprisonment tonight? Fred's eyes widened until they looked like saucers. Professor Snape could joke now? He'd never seen this side of him. Sebastian flicked his wand and snuffed out the lingering flames, scolding, I gave you all that protective gear. Why didn't you wear it? You even fell into a ditch against such a small opponent, Sebastian added, half teasing. Fred rushed to Snape's defense, eager to repay the man who'd risked himself to save him. It wasn't his fault. If I hadn't dragged him down, he began, then added, quieter, Robert was despicable. He used me as a human shield. If he hadn't, Professor Snape would have won easily. Seeing the looks of surprise on both men's faces, Fred's voice dropped to a hushed, earnest whisper. I'm not lying. That's how it was. Sebastian was mildly surprised. This Fred had always been staunchly anti-Slytherin in the stories, yet here he was praising Snape. Sebastian grinned, ruffled Fred's hair, then shot a look at Snape. Come on, let's see what tonight's prize is. They approached a gate of yellow light set into a huge rock. As they drew closer, Fred noticed a tiny line of script next to the gate, nearly swallowed by the glow. Only those with the courage and determination to carry the world on their shoulders may step through to the unknown. Fred hesitated, then voiced the thought that had occurred to him. Professor, could opening this door need my blood? Professor Robert did something like that. Sebastian scoffed. Impossible. If this is tied to Gryffindor, it wouldn't require such evil magic as a blood sacrifice. Gryffindor was a founder, someone of great vision. Robert must have used foul means to trigger it. Normal Gryffindor trials wouldn't work like that. He glanced at Fred, who stared longingly at the gate, and offered encouragement. Why don't you try? If it's Gryffindor's treasure, you should be the one to try. Fred trembled with excitement. He had just had his life saved by these professors and had no desire to compete with them. But Gryffindor's treasure? Among the three of them, he was the sole Gryffindor. Surely that counted for something. He stepped forward, head held high, and reached for the glowing gate. He bumped his forehead against it with a soft thud and bounced backward to sit on the ground, rubbing his head. Ah, I guess I'm not meant for this treasure, he muttered. Sebastian studied the gate, thinking, if it were that simple, someone would have found this long ago. 1,000 years had passed. Surely brave Gryffindor students had come across this rock before. In the early days of Hogwarts, there had been a sort of master-apprentice relationship that might have let the founder pass it on easily. The inscription's line about carrying the world on one's shoulders suggested something more demanding. Try thinking of the bravest thing you've ever done, Sebastian said finally. Call it to mind and try again. Fred scrambled to his feet and scoured his memories, searching for the moment of greatest courage. He stretched his hands toward the gate again, but the light slapped him aside as before. He felt frustrated. He had looked death in the face. Wasn't that brave enough? Apparently not. Snape, by contrast, remained composed. Compared to bearing the world's weight, his own acts of courage felt small. He had only been able to keep Lily in his heart, yet for her, that small courage felt boundless. He thought it through, and in the end, shrugged. I'm not interested in Gryffindor's treasure, he said with a faint smile. With the students done trying, Sebastian straightened his robes and approached the gate. He reached out, and in an instant, Fred watched Professor Swann's figure dissolve into the yellow light and vanish. Fred felt his heart drop. He couldn't believe Gryffindor would pass this test and not choose him. But if the gate accepted a Slytherin, then maybe Sebastian had some sort of rightful claim too. Sebastian stepped into a blinding shimmer and found himself before a pure white Hogwarts castle. The feeling was strange, like stepping into some limbo scene from a play. The great gates opened, and a tall man with fiery red hair and a full beard emerged. He looked familiar and impossibly ancient. Godric Gryffindor? Sebastian blurted. The man's eyes widened. You're still alive? Chapter 58. Did Slytherin eat your rice? Gryffindor is still alive? Sebastian blurted, stunned. 1,000 years had passed. How could that be possible? If Voldemort learned there was a secret to immortality hidden in the Forbidden Forest, he'd be beside himself. That would have been his dream. I am Gryffindor, but Gryffindor is not all of me, the broad, red-haired figure answered in a resonant voice. I am only the memory Gryffindor left behind. Don't read too much into it. It's like the Sorting Hat, only the hat was made by the four founders to hold our thoughts, he added. I am a memory preserved by the magic of the dark forest. No wonder. Sebastian suddenly understood why something had felt off. This Gryffindor's body was pure magic. Only his memories were his own. It was an astonishing method. Before Sebastian could ask more, Gryffindor frowned. Why is it a Slytherin boy? How strange. Someone who found my legacy isn't a Gryffindor student. Have Gryffindors lost the courage to delve into the dark forest? He sighed and fixed Sebastian with a look of displeasure. Sebastian bristled inwardly. What's wrong with Slytherin students? Are you paying for their food? Why the contempt? How did you know I'm Slytherin? I'm not even wearing Slytherin robes, Sebastian snapped. The Sorting Hat's bond with a student is simple. Gryffindor said matter-of-factly. I can tell at a glance which house you belong to. Do you want to pretend to be a Gryffindor? He added, looking down his nose. Sebastian's veins throbbed. Was Gryffindor that proud? He almost blurted, I am a Slytherin, and I'm proud. Slytherin speaks for itself. But he knew better than to be rude to a founder, even a preserved memory. Slytherins were adaptable. He swallowed his pride and answered calmly. The Dark Forest, you call it. Hogwarts students now call it the Forbidden Forest, he said. Students aren't allowed in anymore. You shouldn't expect a Gryffindor student to discover this legacy. He straightened. Slytherin students are brave too. Besides, Slytherins are Hogwarts students as well. That makes me your student. You can't hide things from me just because I'm Slytherin. I passed whatever test you set. Gryffindor laughed. If the boy had tried to wheedle and flatter, he would have been sent away. This Slytherin was neither obsequious nor insolent. He spoke with reason. That steadiness, that courage, appealed to Gryffindor. Good, I overthought it, he admitted. Never mind that you're Slytherin. If you have the courage to bear the weight of the world, it matters not which house you're from. I am Gryffindor, he said, his tone turning stern. The air about him tightened, his magic simmered. The memory in front of Sebastian took on the bearing of a lion stalking its prey, eyes locked on him. Do you want my legacy? Gryffindor asked. Then attack me with everything you have, boy. Let me test your worth. Let us have a proper lesson in battle. With that, a long sword of shimmering magic appeared in Gryffindor's right hand and a wand in his left. He crouched into an attack stance, sword pointed toward Sebastian. I'll show you the ways of the mightiest close combat wizard. For a moment, Sebastian felt as though all surrounding magic had been reined in. The tides of power flowing from Gryffindor made the air feel like the open ocean and the man like a towering wave. The demeanor of the strongest wizard of 1,000 years ago. Bring it on. Sebastian's wand was in his hand in an instant. Close combat wizard? Coincidentally, he'd picked up some martial techniques during his travels east. He met Gryffindor's gaze, then raised his wand and fired 3 spells in a triangular formation, cutting off escape routes. Gryffindor didn't dodge. He charged. He met the first spell head-on with a sword swipe that deflected it. The other 2 struck him, and a shining shield charm flashed. The spells were bounced away, but something was wrong. The shield charm had appeared without any visible casting and felt oddly thick, like iron armor against a wooden club. It was too immediate and too dense to be ordinary defense. Sebastian realized it wasn't a single charm, but multiple, layered protections. Before he could think more, Gryffindor blurred to his side like a phantom and swung his sword down with lightning speed. Don't zone out, boy. I carry all the magic of the Dark Forest within me. Don't underestimate me, because I'm not the man in the flesh. Sebastian shifted, narrowly avoiding the blade, and then forced distance. If you're a ranged fighter facing a melee specialist, you kite, or you die. He began to keep his distance, peppering Gryffindor with spells while dodging in and out. After a few exchanges, a pattern emerged. Gryffindor's shield charm was composed of many layers stacked together, which explained its unusual resilience. That gave Sebastian an idea. He would test his strongest offensive spell. Sectum Sempra, he shouted. Gryffindor seemed to read his intent and stood his ground, letting the spell strike full force. The curse sliced through the outer layer of protection, but lacked the power to break them all. In that instant, Sebastian understood the genius of the tactic recorded in history. Gryffindor favored a longsword because his layered defenses let him soak up most spell attacks, close the distance, and finish the fight in melee. With a goblin-forged sword that cut clean and a body fortified by stacked charms, he could charge through a storm of spells and strike decisively when most wizards were still firing from afar. In an age of poor communication and surprise tactics, it was terrifyingly effective. Gryffindor laughed as the Sectum Sempra failed to break through. Do you understand? He asked, triumphant. This is the legacy left here, my unique method, the stacked curse. Feel it, think it through. Break yourself in battle and learn this technique. Slytherin boy, I will take good care of you. Chapter 59, Alchemy in the Guise of a Spell. How long had that been suppressed? Why did he get so excited the moment a fight began? Watching the eager Gryffindor, Sebastian raised his hands in a stopping gesture. Stop. The sudden halt made the battle-hungry Gryffindor bristle. He fixed Sebastian with a glare, hair seeming to rise like an enraged lion, and snarled, "What's the matter, boy? Afraid to fight me? Don't you even have the courage to duel me?" Sebastian taunted back. "Your teaching methods are inefficient. I want to try a different approach." Gryffindor's temper flared. He stamped his foot. "Oh, do tell then. Master, show me how to teach." Sebastian recognized the sarcasm, but he knew his own strength. When it came to spells, he had a method, perfect imitation. With his unique magic perception, he could watch someone cast a spell and reproduce it almost immediately. He smiled and said smoothly, "Just cast it once. I'll learn it by watching." "Learn it by watching once?" Gryffindor scoffed. "Don't flatter yourself. Learning it in 3 days would already be exceptional. 2 days would be top tier even in our era. 1 day? Ha! If you can do it in 1 day," Sebastian cut in, curious. "I'll give you a thumbs up and admit, how impressive." Gryffindor rolled his eyes. "I've taught this to quite a few students. Only a handful picked it up in 3 days. Most never mastered it at all." "Learning it by watching once?" Sebastian kept pushing. "What, Professor Gryffindor? You wouldn't dare try?" "Never." Gryffindor hemmed and hawed, and Sebastian feigned innocence, playing the humble pupil. The insult hit home. Gryffindor's face darkened and his magic boiled, surging toward Sebastian in waves. How dare someone question his courage? "I'll warn you, if you don't learn it after watching once, I'll give you a proper beating to vent my anger," Gryffindor barked. "During our earlier spar, I didn't cast a single real spell at you. I was just toying with basic combat moves." "Watch closely," he snapped, forcing himself to speak calmly. "I'll demonstrate slowly. Pay attention." Despite his irritation, Gryffindor's movements were exacting and deliberate, and he explained the crucial points without holding back. The key is the finishing motion of the first shield charm. Slow the flow of your magic at the end, then, with absolute control, connect it directly into the second shield charm. "There are 2 difficulties," he warned, "the rate at which you slow your magic and the absolute control over your own power. 1 slip and you'll cast 2 separate shield charms. Don't be careless," he said, raising his voice. "This is only the first step, the foundation. The real trick comes next." Stacked curse. The key is the stack itself. Watch my hand movements closely. Sebastian didn't dare relax. He fixed his gaze on every motion and turned his magic perception up to its limit, tracing every subtle flow of power. In his senses, Gryffindor's control was exquisite, strong and precise, like a blacksmith doing embroidery with a needle. The shield charms piled up, each one aligning perfectly with the last, forming a neat, interlocking structure as elegant as art. A flash of insight struck him. This layering technique was so much like engraving magical circuits in alchemy. No wonder it was difficult. The stacked curse was alchemy disguised as spellwork. Without basic alchemical understanding, learning it was almost impossible. It also explained why its defense was so formidable. Like chainmail among muggles, Gryffindor used individual shield charms as components to weave a wizardly armor. Truly brilliant. Gryffindor's reputation was well earned. Only now did Sebastian feel the weight behind the name. "All right, watch this final step." Gryffindor's shout snapped him back. Sebastian saw the 9th shield charm reach its finishing motion. With a precise flick, Gryffindor completed it so that the 9th joined seamlessly with the previous 8, becoming a single unit. This is the stacked curse. 9 shield charms connected as one form a layer. The more layers, the stronger the defense. Theoretically, you can stack indefinitely. Your defense could become infinitely strong. But be warned, with every layer you add, your required control must be that much greater. One small mistake and all your work is wasted. Gryffindor paused and regarded Sebastian meaningfully. "Doesn't it seem cumbersome? Besides being powerful, it's not as flexible as a single shield charm." Sebastian nodded in agreement. In the chaos of actual combat, who had time to layer protections one by one? One misstep and everything collapsed. It seemed impractical, unless the stacked curse could be prepared in advance and remain. A new realization dawned on him, and Gryffindor chuckled. Although it's troublesome to form, once a stacked curse is complete, it builds its own magic circuit, draws power from the air, and stabilizes. You can prepare it ahead of time, stack many layers. Usually it lies dormant and doesn't affect your daily life. It only manifests when you're attacked or when you summon it. How's that for impressive? Only then did Sebastian fully grasp its significance, an endlessly scalable defense that could be prepared and kept ready. From that perspective, it was incredibly powerful, an invisible, continuously reinforced protection. A new name formed in his mind for the spell. Gryffindor watched him nod, pleased. He stroked his beard and teased, "Well then, Master, begin your performance." Chapter 60. We agreed not to hit people in the face. Is this supposed to be a joke? Very well, old man. Remember how you look now. Sebastian Swann closed his eyes and ran the flow of Gryffindor's magic through his mind from beginning to end. His wand described a graceful arc, the motion light and precise like a dancing elf. He cast the second shield charm without hesitation. When Gryffindor saw it take, his face shifted, surprise, then disbelief. What? How is this possible? The second shield charm took on the first try, and it held steady, linked to the first. The third formed as easily, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Gryffindor grew more and more unsettled, his confidence crumbling. Almost succeeded? This kid is strong. Don't be hasty. The ninth is the finishing touch. He can't possibly make it. If he did, I'd do a handstand for him on the spot. When Sebastian cast the eighth shield charm, Gryffindor opened his eyes and broke the act. He put on an exaggeratedly troubled expression and appealed to the younger wizard. Professor Gryffindor, I'm losing control a bit. I really need your encouragement right now. Encouragement? Gryffindor scoffed inwardly. If encouragement worked, why would I be a dual professor? I might as well become a cheerleader and boost my students every morning. But watching Sebastian's stubborn determination, he couldn't help himself. He extended a thumb, hesitated, and muttered, "Go for it." At that, Sebastian's wand flashed in a perfect arc. The ninth shield charm snapped into place, locking into the others. The 9 shields connected together formed a single solid barrier. Sebastian felt it, a sense of resilience unlike any single charm could provide. A normal shield charm only held in the direction the caster pointed the wand, serving as a one-sided defense. Now, linked end to end, they surrounded him, a full, layered protection. A single shield charm would fail against a killing curse. But what about stacked shield charms? According to Gryffindor, what Sebastian had just done was only a single layer of stacking. What if he piled on more layers? Hundreds, thousands. Could someone with enough layers stand up to Voldemort's killing curse? Knock him flat and shout, "Anyone else?" Sebastian's heart thudded at the thought. Impossible, Gryffindor roared from the side. His jaw dropped. He grabbed Sebastian by the collar with both hands, eyes wild. "I don't believe it. Kid, you tricked me. Encouragement can't be that effective. No one ever succeeds on the first try. You must have learned this before," Gryffindor insisted. "But how?" Sebastian began. "You said this skill was lost. That's why you left the inheritance sealed in the secret realm." Gryffindor let go, looking suddenly exhausted. He flopped down on the steps and patted the stone beside him. "Slytherin boy, this is the last lesson I want to give you. The duel of spells between wizards is actually a contest of magic power," he said slowly. "Many spells require a strong magical foundation. If your magic isn't deep enough, no amount of stacked shields will save you against a wizard with greater power. My students died because of that. They worshipped the stacking technique blindly and paid for it." Strong magical foundation. The word struck Sebastian. He remembered a line in the original tales. Even certain defensive spells had limits if your opponent's power was overwhelming. Now he saw why. Gryffindor watched him carefully, then continued in a grave tone. "The stacked shield technique is not invincible. You must judge whether your stacked shields can counter your opponent. That requires very keen magical perception. Don't be arrogant, or you'll die." Strong magical perception. Sebastian relaxed. That was his strength. This technique felt tailored to him. This trip into the Forbidden Forest had been worth it. "Later, I grew disheartened and stopped teaching the stacking method," Gryffindor said. "I couldn't bear to lose it entirely, so I left this inheritance here, deep in the forest, after Slytherin left the chamber and departed the school." "Does that mean Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff left their inheritances at Hogwarts too?" Sebastian asked, excitement in his voice. "Perhaps. Perhaps not. That's for you to find out." Gryffindor smiled faintly, then grew serious. He raised his wand to his chest and performed a dueling salute. Tell me your name, Slytherin boy. You have my approval. Sebastian Swann, professor at Hogwarts, seeks your guidance, Sebastian said aloud, returning the salute solemnly. Gryffindor laughed, a warm, booming sound. He hefted his magical longsword and charged, wand flashing spells from his left hand. I am Godric Gryffindor, head of Gryffindor House. Allow me one last lesson. Sebastian didn't back down. He met Gryffindor's charge head-on, wand steady, and the two of them clashed in a fierce, dazzling duel. When it was over, Gryffindor's form was already beginning to fade. Farewell, Professor Gryffindor, Sebastian said quietly. Rest in peace. When the battle ended, Sebastian stumbled out of the secret realm, bruised and battered. He covered his face with a hand, waved his wand to haul Robert to his side, and then produced 3 flying brooms as if from nowhere. He tossed them toward a stunned Fred and Snape and muttered, "Don't ask why." Nothing happened, someone murmured. Requesting everything, deeply grateful.